Yeah, you can take a look yourself if you can see.
Yeah.
Captures
Okay.
the whole house.
Yeah. Okay.
Alright, so I'm gonna pause it. I can find the pause.
Hello, Tisha.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful, Reverend.
Oh, I am so glad that you were willing to let us tape you to talk about the voices of the Tripp House. It was my desire that the entire church would have a sense of what a wonderful gift that you offered for housing for the intentional interim pastor. I am so grateful for that. And in our conversations, you have shared so much history about the Tripp House. I just wanted everybody to know about it.
Well, there is a lot of history, yes.
Oh, but how did it get, why is it called the Tripp House?
Well, that is because it was a Mr. Henry Tripp who bought it, I don't know which year. He was not from around here, I think, but he left it to his daughter, who was a spinster, who didn't have children, and left it then to the church and to the library. And that's when it came to, well, we decided to buy it because we found out that most of the area between the two houses belonged to the Tripp house. And that meant that we really couldn't get into our own barn. And the interesting thing was that they had allowed us to make a driveway. And they said, oh yeah, that's fine, go ahead, make a driveway, gravel and all that. And then later on we found out that that is where they used to picnic. And so it was a sacrifice, but in those days, people just,
They were neighborly.
it was not a major thing. So anyway, then we made a bid, and we made the highest bid, and therefore we bought the Tripp house, believe it or not, for $6,000.
Oh, wow.
And of course you have to understand that it didn't have heating, it had only one faucet, had an outhouse in the barn, and the electricity was sort of Thomas Edison type of bulbs. It was an old place. And so the content was, there was an auction on the lawn of the Wakefield Inn, and everything more or less got sold except the Bible, which I have, and I think someday we should probably put it back in the Tripp house, and a beautiful big salad bowl. Those are the two things that we found and hadn't been auctioned.
Oh, wow.
So then we said, I thought it was a ridiculous idea of my husband to want to buy the house. I said, my God, we haven't paid for the mortgage for this one. He said, well, I think it's a good idea because if somebody is going to live there with a family, there is not even a place for a septic tank. So anyway, I think he was absolutely right now, I think that. I didn't then. But it opened tremendous possibilities. The first ones who came to stay there was a group of Cigane music players from his university in Holland, who had asked him to be their impresario. And so there were 6 students who came with their violins and a cimbalom, and it was my husband's favorite music, Cigane music, gypsy music. And so they stayed there, and we provided them with chamber pots because there was only one option. So that's how it started, and then we fixed the place up a little bit and made sure that there was plumbing and so forth, and then our parents would come and stay there, and family. And very importantly, there were many friends of Gijs from Holland who got internships and residencies and fellowships in the hospitals in Boston. And they would come here, they found out that we lived here, and they came with their children, and their children spoke Dutch. And they taught our children to speak Dutch, because the kids here realized that no other child spoke Dutch. And so they were shy about that.
Uh-huh.
But then when they found out there were other kids that could speak Dutch, then it started them, and that's wonderful because now I can speak Dutch with my son,
Yeah.
who ended up actually living in Holland for a while. But anyway, so the next big thing was that I started a pony club, and on the weekends, all kids would come with their horses, and their parents would cook lasagnas and what have you, and they would come on Friday afternoon after school, and the parents would pick them up again on Sunday afternoon, and in the meantime we taught them, and I just, you know, at that time the elephant couldn't do harm in that house, so we said, okay, behave yourself, you can cook your own dinner, and I trust you. And so only once did I come in and there was all this smoke because they'd forgotten that they put the bacon on, and there was an emergency with the horse, and so they all went out to take care of the emergency of the horse. In the meantime, the bacon. But that's the only time that I thought, whoa, I trusted them a lot. But that was a wonderful time, and we had horse trials in the whole village, and it was a great time. So then when my kids became teenagers, and with their loud music, we said, why don't you go to the Tripp house?
The Grateful Dead.
Yeah, the Grateful Dead. So that was the period of that, and I have to think. And then in the meantime, there was the inn next door, and the inn went bankrupt many times. Mm. It had all sorts of very interesting people in it. And at one point, there was a group of hippies. And we found that out. My husband one morning was walking when we still had the post office at the end of the street. And he was walking over there to get the mail. And there was this guy with long hair and sandals. And now we're talking late 60s, early 70s. And so this man caught up with him. And Gijs, polite, said, hello, how are you? And after, what do you do for a living? He said, oh, I'm a writer. I write pornography. Gijs said, oh, that's interesting.
Pornography?
Pornography.
Okay.
So it was obviously a very loose living group. It was
a popular genre in the 60s.
Commune, really. It was a commune. And one day, two policemen, local policemen, came to me and asked if they could spy on the neighbors from the Tripp house. And I said no. I just didn't think that was a proper thing. But it turned out there was good reason for them to be very suspicious.
Okay.
And in the end, but that's another story. Back to the Tripp house. So when the people that tried to run the Wakefield Inn and be there, and then there would be bankruptcy again, and then they would be out on the street. So twice the owners lived in the Tripp house as an immediate, you know, where do we go kind of thing. Mm-hmm. One stayed there only for very little time. The other family stayed there for almost a year. And I can remember her bathing the baby that she had in the sink in the Tripp house. Yeah. So anyhow, so another thing that the Tripp house was used for was people who got in marital trouble. And so my husband found out that he had a colleague who seemed to be living out of his car. He was in a messy divorce. And so Gijs began to find that out and said, well, why don't you come and live in the Tripp house? So he did, and he stayed there for more than a year, I'm sure. And then a friend came, she sold her house, couldn't immediately build another house. So that took a couple of years. So she found her place there. And our daughter Joan, she lived there the last part of her life before she died of breast cancer. Mm-hmm. And so I identify the Tripp house very much with her because the way she decorated the house and the things she left there really characterized the house a lot. And so to me, I feel her every time that I can walk into the house, which I haven't done too much of lately. But, yeah. So then, after that episode, I started to write, as a matter of fact, because of Joan's death. And at the same time, my husband had retired from his active practice in the office, and we said, well, what shall we do are we going to stay here? Well, we had so many ties to this village and to this house, and that we said, you know, well, let's stay here and let's make it work for us. So we turned that part, which was my husband's office, into the Dutch boutique and gallery. And we sold things that my husband painted, which was a lot of hinderlopen, which is a local folk art. And I did photography still at that time. I mean, he had a ball with that. But the writing began to take over my photography, and then I got asked to be in a writer's workshop up north in Maine, and that really inspired me. And I thought, wait, you know, we've got the Tripp house, it's empty right now, why don't we turn it into the Twin Farms Writers' Workshops? And that's what we did. And,
Inspired by Molasses Pond workshops.
Right,
Yep.
yeah, Molasses Pond in Maine,
Yep.
yeah. And so the Molasses Ponders eventually came all over here because they lost the place on Molasses Pond, and so they looked for another place. And I said, well, why don't you come over here? And I've done that I wrote it down, from 1995 to, and the last year was in 2013.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And I'm living proof of it. I'm an alumni of Twin Farms Writers Workshop.
Rob, scoot
Yeah.
over.
Is that my cue?
Yeah, scoot
Oh.
over, Rob.
And
Yes,
closer,
Oh, this is Rob Nelson. Oh, yes. Wow.
Good to be here.
Yes,
Yes.
wonderful that you could come.
Oh.
It's a Monday.
Yeah.
The writers' workshop. So the different voices that have inhabited the Tripp house all usually came with the need for hospitality, for housing, and for support. And then it moves into creativity to allow the voice of creativity to come forth in writing.
Absolutely.
So it became a kind of muse?
Yes.
Oh, I would say absolutely in my case, and I think in several other people's cases as well. It was
Yes.
a
Well, describe a day.
in a day in the writer's workshop.
Yeah.
Oh, it was get up in the morning, hear a bunch of chitter chatter downstairs by the big oak table,
Yeah.
and a bunch of writers musing over their whatever thoughts are going on in their day, and the topics ranged everything from personal matters perhaps, but or what was going on politically, or scenes of a story, and I was at a particularly imaginative time in my life at that point, induced by life circumstances, and so I had a lot to say about a madman who speaks to his chimney. That was my fictional story that I was coming up with, and just had a wonderful time, and it was such a facilitating experience to have to be surrounded by people of that wanted to express whatever they wanted to express, and we would it was a 4-day
It was 4 or 5 days. Yeah.
4 or 5 days, and we would write and talk and muse and write, and then
We had instruction in the library next door, and we had our dinners in the barn.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so it made for 3 places. You know, they were in the Tripp house, and on the porch is where we did our readings to each other and critiquing. And then after that we had lots of wine and lovely food that I had to cook.
Tizzy was the master of ceremony. You always hired somebody to do the regimented stuff.
Yeah.
But you were the master of ceremony. You set the tone.
Yeah.
If anybody was going a little bit too much on something or whatever, Tizzy was the one that would move things along.
Yeah. I remember a few instances.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So,
And then at the last day, we would invite people from the village or beyond to come and listen to
the readings?
to the
Oh yeah,
readings.
that was
Yeah.
that was a wonderful
Yeah.
experience.
And so nobody was forced to do it, only if they wanted to.
Yeah.
But most of them wanted to. So everybody got a chance to, you know, and also part of that was to learn to speak. And we once had, one of the teachers was, I'll think of her name Becky Rule, and she's a very humoristic writer, and she was teaching here, was the instructor that week. And I remember that we were in the library, and she made us realize what it is to communicate with people and what you do when you read from your own stuff. And she said, so, you know, you're going to be interrupted, there are going to be people sitting there, you know. And so she instructed the others, if somebody came up, to make noises and, you know, interrupt. And there was this wonderful lady. She was very much a sort of a Bostonian lady, and she was one of the what do we call it, the writers that was here. And at one point she came out and said, "You shut up!" And we were all like, "Woo!" And then we also actually went to the church.
That's what I remember.
Yeah,
was
yeah.
the hot seat
Yeah.
right at the pulpit.
Right, yeah, because then we still had a microphone there that I knew how to turn on. And so we'd go into the church and I had them do it there. And so we learned a lot about how to use a microphone and to face an audience and so forth. We had a lot of fun.
Oh, I can hear that. I hear that. Now, were there other ministers that also stayed at the Tripp house?
No, never.
Okay.
No, and I forget to mention one thing, and that is that when we bought the house and went through it, we never knew that there had been a cobbler shop right over the garage. And it was amazing. It was as though there should have been a sign on the door, back in an hour. Because the cobbler bench was there, all the lasts were on the wall, pieces of leather, all his knives and tools, everything was there. And I do not know, it obviously had to be before Henry Tripp and Esther Tripp, but at one point it was a cobbler shop.
Wow.
But only in the back, of course. Yeah.
Which reminds me, I need to get my son's green screen out of there because he used it as his filming room.
Yeah.
To make his YouTube videos.
Right. I had turned it into a studio when I was doing photography still. And so I said to Rob's son, Connor, you know, if you like to do photography, you know, go over there. It's, yeah. So the house has always been a place of inspiration or where people were welcome. And so when Rob lived there for 9 years, and then one day told me last year that he was going to move to the coast, and immediately people said to me, "Oh well, put an ad in the paper, you know," and I said, "No, something's going to happen. Something always happens to the Tripp house that needs to be a roof over somebody's head." There you are.
Enter Reverend Alberta.
And I am delighted.
Oh, and so am I. And so am I. So now Rob is going to take us, we're going to go over to the Tripp house so that we can see some of the things that you have talked about.
Okay.
And we'll film those over at the Tripp house.
That's great.
Thank you so much for giving us the background history. Now we're going to hear about the voices of the Tripp house from Rob as one who lived there and who was also part of the writer's workshop.
Oh, this might get my imagination going. Should I?
Good.
Should I
There's
keep
a
it?
limit.
Yes. I know we have to. This has to be presentable to the masses.
There's a limit.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, we're going to get ready to go over to the house now. Rob, tell us what would take place here.
Hello. Yes, absolutely. Well, this is the dead of winter, so it's a little different now than it usually is. We would have the workshops in July typically. But here, this is the barn, and I don't know if you can see that with the camera, but there's nice carpeting, stall-to-stall carpeting. This is where we would have our dinners and discussions here, as well as the screen porch at the Tripp house. And then at the end of the evening, Tizia and Hyas would invite numerous people from the community, and they would all be in chairs right where you're standing. And then typically a writer would be either here behind the podium, or we would set the podium over here by Nutmeg's stall. And we would just have I guess a performance, if you could call it that, a reading performance.
Yes.
And we were each allotted 5 minutes to have our piece.
Yeah.
And it went very well, and
That's great.
they were able to pack sometimes 30 to 40 people in,
Oh,
in
wow.
this little space here.
I see the sign back there that says Dutch Boutique and Gallery. I know that Tizia had talked about that she and Hyas did a Dutch Boutique and Gallery after he retired.
Yes, they did. Yes, that was before my tenure here.
That was before your tenure.
It was just before that, and that was one of their other many things that that they did in the community. Yes.
Alrighty.
Yep.
Okay, Rob, we're going to get ready to go into the house
Oh,
now.
very well. Okay.
Rob, we're now in the Tripp house.
Yes, we are. It's a little warmer in here, isn't it?
It's a little warmer here, so
I'll take off my hat. Or actually, should I?
Yeah, this is just fine.
My,
so now
pardon
we're
my
here
hat.
in the dining room area.
Yes, this is where.
Tell us about this table.
Well, this is it's a beautiful table for one thing. It's that salt box style table built. I believe Tizia and Hyas had a master carpenter come in and actually build it in the room because it's so big it won't. You can't take it out once it's in.
Yeah.
But we had some wonderful conversations on this table, and
so the writers would gather here at different times of the day.
Yep, different times of the day, and there's a lot of floating time too. Within the regiment of what we were learning, the workshops, there was time for us to write, muse, and just chat, drink coffee, and this was where a lot of that informal musing occurred. Usually, sometimes the early mornings and late nights tend to be a place for this spot here. And it's if the house could speak, it would have a lot to say about what was discussed here at this table. For sure.
Oh, well, thank you. I want us to get a shot of the picture here because it does show that this picture was done by Hyas.
Yes, that was one of his most wonderful works right there.
Okay, we're gonna have the camera to swing around there. So just a second, hold on to your thoughts.
Okay.
All right.
Here we are, 90-degree swing.
Tell us about this picture here. What do you know about that? I see that it has the bourgeois signature on it. So is that one that Tizia's husband did?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, this is Hyas's work, and I actually don't know the details of when he did it, but I do know that he loved putting wings in his in his work, and this one has obvious wings, the seagull birds, and he always had 3 for whatever the reason.
Ah.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
And you'll see that in a lot of his other works. Even if there's no birds involved, you'll see just 3 little wings.
Oh, wow.
That was his thing. This is a beautiful piece. It goes great with the Hinterlopen, which is also something he had a passion for. And this is all the stuff that he did. Hinterlopen is a town in Holland,
Okay.
and this is the style of it, essentially. Here he got pretty far. He didn't quite finish this area. There's a few other areas you can see over here.
Okay, we'll flip the camera around so that we can see that one over there.
Yeah.
But tell us about the memorial behind you to Joan.
Oh, yes. This is a very, very special place. I sensed it the day I moved in here. I promised Tizia that I would keep my creative imagination to a minimum for this purpose, but let's just say I felt like I was being observed when I first came here. And I don't know if it's Joan or the many other souls that have been through this place, but this is in honor of Joan. This is all her artwork. She was a fine potter and a photographer, jewelry maker. She loved to create and express, from what I understand.
Wonderful, yeah.
So that's always the place that I kept. When I lived here in my 9-year stay, I always made sure that stayed pristine.
Yes. And you were, I like the term, you said that you were a steward of the Tripp House. And I really like that term because it shows how much respect you have for the history and for the, especially the specialness of Joan, who had her hospice stay here, and her work still remain. So
it's an honor to be part of the long list of people that have had a chance to live here at the Tripp House, and there is I think a respect that the house deserves.
Yes. Well, thank you. Now we're gonna move our camera so that we can. I think we're going to go downstairs. We're going to start. We're going to start.
While the camera's going, we're going to go downstairs. That's I do want to mention something about. This is one of the fireplaces, but it's been blocked with stuff because it's no longer an active fireplace. But one of the wonderful things about these colonial style houses is it's a very colonial method. That stems back to the days when the chimney was the fire-breathing heart and lifeblood of a house, and that was the one source of heat. So this is this house, as well as the Beaudois house, is a typical what they call a center chimney colonial. And basically you have this monolith, which we're going to go down in the basement and I'll show you, but it's a monolith of a base, and then you have a massive chimney that just goes right up from that monolith, and you have a number of fireplaces in it. Here we have this one here, there's one on the other side, there's another Dutch oven right here where your wood stove is also attached to. And then I don't know if this house has it or not, but typically there's fireplaces in the second floors as well, all stemming from the same single chimney that goes up.
Wow.
And the chimney also provides the support of the house as well, which you can't do these days. You can't build off of a chimney. It's a code thing. But back in those days, it was like that's the center post of the house. So anyway, I just wanted to give some mention to the chimney of this house.
Okay. Well, let us just regroup and take the camera downstairs to see the heart of the home.
Yes. All right.
Okay.
Howdy. Okay, here we are in the basement of the Tripp House. As I was saying upstairs, one of my favorite aspects of this house is the chimney. And if I don't know if you can get a sense for the size of this monolith of a base that supports the 5 fireboxes upstairs, all stemming to from one center chimney. But over here, and this is the real neat thing that they did back in those colonial days was they made a root cellar, and I don't know how the lighting is, but you can see they just essentially built a tunnel that goes into this area right here, and it stays nice and cool and damp, and that's where the old colonists were able to keep their food preserved, and as well as and they built it like a dome, which was the strongest of the masonry shapes to support the massive brickwork that was required to get all these flues out the roof of the out the top of the roof. There's another trip we could take to the attic to show what happens to get this monolith down to the size of a typical chimney, but maybe we'll spare that trip.
Alrighty then,
Okay.
we're gonna head back upstairs.
Okay.
Alrighty. Rob, tell us what we're standing in front of. What is this?
Oh, well, this is another angle of the wonderful chimney, and this is the back side of the chimney, and we have one firebox here, which has been now renovated to accommodate a wood stove, and then they had these glorious little things here that the ingenuity of the folks back in the colonial days. It's I think a Dutch oven they're called, and you just you had your little firebox down here, and actually I don't know the technicalities of how it worked, so I'm not even going to try. But
this is
basically,
still
you would bake your bread.
Yeah.
You would keep your things warm in here and bake your bread.
So that's original to the house.
This is original, which is 1780.
Okay.
And that's so we're talking, 170 years before the
Wow.
bourgeois even came here.
Wow, wow, wow. Okay, we're gonna move on further into the house.
Very well. Okay.
So, Rob, tell us about this room and that fireplace.
Oh, yeah, very well. This is the living room, a bit more formal than the other rooms of the house, and here is another angle of that center chimney. Here's the firebox in the living room. This is I believe this is the original mantle and all that stuff. And as I don't know if you can pan up and see these are the original hand-hewn beams, which were indicative of this style of house back in those days. They would say find whatever was locally available and just make your build the whole skeleton of your house with these tree-sized beams.
Wow.
What's neat about this room is that it's been renovated several times, I think, but it still maintains the original beam exposure, which I think is really cool.
Ah, all
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Thank
As
you.
far as the writer's workshop goes, this was we didn't use this room so much for our musings. I mean, it did occur. I mean, the whole house was open to anything,
Yeah.
but it was mostly the other room and or around the
The
fireplace.
dining room
and
around the
kitchen.
fireplace. Yeah.
Kitchens, yeah.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
Alrighty then.
Yep.
We're gonna head upstairs. Now, Rob, what is this?
Oh, well, yeah, we can't forget this. This is the original sink of the house going back to 1780. So it's a nice piece actually. It's a copper pan up top here, and it's not a functioning sink anymore, but it was back in the day. You would just crank this handle, and the spring that this was tapped into would just that you get your water that way. You could clean your baby, you could wash your carrots, all the works.
Yeah. Alrighty. Okay. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna move along.
Mm-hmm. This is the oh yeah, good.
Go ahead.
Oh, we're on?
Yes.
Oh, this is my favorite musing room of the house here. This is my special place. I call it my transcendence chamber, where I would sit right here and have my guitar in hand. And the way this chamber is made, the sound just reverberates beautifully off this. And I would spend hours on end in my stay here, just listening to my guitar sing. And half the times I didn't even think I was playing it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Alrighty then.
And
Okay.
I believe that Tizia told me that they had one of those diviners, those people that that see where the energy of a house
Yes.
is, and I guess his rod went berserk when he got into this area right here. This is an energy central point of the house.
Ah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. The names on the rooms.
Okay.
So we can.
Go ahead.
Oh,
This is so, and you can see each room has a name on it. I don't know if you're gonna move forward to see the name, so you could just get a shot.
Here's Joan's room.
This is Joan's room. I don't know if you can get closer.
I zoomed in.
Okay. Okay. And you're gonna have to swing around the other way so that you can.
this isn't actually a name. This is the Pony Club room.
Okay.
Yeah, and we always tried to keep the history of the house intact as far as the a lot of these names. The Pony Club was obviously the club that the Bourgeois started with the horses and everything. And Joan's room is in memory of Joan. Who,
And then we have
started here.
Penny's room here.
You can say a few words.
Penny Curtis is a wonderful friend of the Bourgeois, and also her daughter Sang was good friends with Joan growing up, and Paul too, for that matter.
Yeah. And what about the popcorn room? Where did that name come from?
Popcorn. That would be this right here. The popcorn. I have a feeling that was the name of one of their horses.
Ah.
But you might want to confer with Titi on that. Maybe that's where a lot of people ate popcorn. I don't know.
Okay. All righty.
That's okay.
The back staircase that I just happened to slip on my pajamas and slid down. But it.
In spite of the pastor cage.
You can't keep a pastor in a cage. All righty then. Let us go downstairs.
Okay.
And this is the classic staircase of the houses of this nature, the colonial center chimney houses, where we're at the front of the house and you simply wind down. Almost every house of this nature has this kind of arrangement of some sort. This one's kind of neat because you have the curved woodwork here that just kind of flows with the stairs.
Okay. Thank you, Rob.
Okay.
All right.
Here we are back outside again, and in closing, this is where we, again, it's the summer, springtime. This is the most amazing cherry tree. It just blossoms. It's like just a giant cotton ball of snowflakes and buzzing bees. It's a great place. And then this is the screen porch juxtaposed. The screen porch is where we had our real discussions with the writers' workshops. And that's juxtaposed next to the cobbler shop, which is attached to the Tripp house. And then if you can actually, my favorite scene of this whole thing is how you can actually get a nice view of the church steeple centered exactly on the driveway, and that was always so inspiring to be here and see that.
How beautiful.
Isn't that nice?
That is nice. Thank you so much, Rob.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
I am so appreciative of Tisha and you are participating in the Voices of the Tripp House so that we will learn a little bit more about the history and can continue to appreciate the wonderful gift that she gave to the church and to me. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for letting me record my voice of the Tripp house.